Representative Walters,
He is here, but he is excused for right now.
Representative Swanitzer,
Here.
Chairman Nicholas.
Did you say Walters? Really bad. We're gonna tweak it 6 and 7, aren't we? We have any read referrals?
You've got 88, 116, 118, and 196. All highlighted yellow.
Yeah. I think we should look at those first. Volunteer firefighter pension. Oh, but we can do that. We just need to cut some funding. What's numbers on? 118. Well, we'll start with 118. From referral. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as I understand this bill, what it does is you'll recall last year when we corrected Fire A, we diverted some of the future earnings to the volunteer firemen from the insurance account to help cover the state's portion of that up till I think 2035 or something. Doesn't impact anyone's benefits. Now, what this bill does is it says that once it makes sure that these funds go, once that's satisfied, that it then comes back to the volunteer firefighter and EMT. Section 2, Mr. Chairman, goes in and appropriates $9 million general funds to make up for the general funds that we're saving by using the premium. So I mean, when we took the funds from the gross premium tax and we look at the future expectation on this particular account, the actuary said we're not really impairing it that much. And so the question is, do we need to add $9 million? Or should we just let the account backfill itself once the premium tax on the volunteers has reached its, we brought that account up to amount that is sustainable. So, Mr. Chairman, if we had not taken the money, diverted the money, it would have been fully funded in 2031. Taking the money out diverts it being fully funded until 2046, does not impact a single individual. And so what we were trying to do was save some general fund dollars. This appropriation basically just reverses that effort.
Mr. Chairman.
So go to the fiscal note on the back. It's a pretty good description. So, Mr. Chairman, if we work this bill, I would make a motion or an amendment that we strike section 2, which is the appropriation. So do we know when the volunteer fund will be, when this event will happen? Which event? The gross premiums are no longer needed for the diversion of the 2040. When all of the
Yeah, and what this bill says is in the other language, it says once the obligations of fire A take place, then it goes back to funding the volunteer fire.
Mr. Chairman, if I recall, we overfunded the rescue plan for Fire A by about $10 million because it was they estimated it would cost 45. The Senate said, let's put in 55, and we did. Right, and then 20 from the city, so it was actually a $75 million rescue. And the rescue on Fire A also said that when all the payments are done in the year 2052, any excess money goes back to Fire B.
That's correct.
So doesn't this, if this bill were to pass in its present form with its appropriation, doesn't it sort of raise the cost of everything another $9 million?
But is this volunteer plan part of fire B?
I don't think so.
It's-
I thought it was,
Oh, these are the volunteers, not.
Right.
What plan are the volunteers in? I thought they
think
were
it
in.
was-
Volunteer.
There's a separate volunteer plan that's not Fire B.
it's in the volunteer firefighter, emergency medical technician, and search and rescue pension account.
Which we created basically about 8 years ago.
So we created that in about 6 years ago. We took, and it was funded with like 40 or 50% of this premium, that insurance premium from fire insurance. And then about 6 years ago, we moved it to where 100% of that premium that comes into the state. It's a tax on fire insurance premiums to the insurance company they pay. We took all of that and put it over into the volunteer fire to accelerate that being in. So
Is there any public comment? Any public comment? Okay, we'll close public comment. We have a motion on the re-referral on the fiscal note. Been moved, do pass. Any amendments?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that on page, I do have an amendment that's seconded to delete section 2, which is to delete the appropriation, the $9 million.
Second. Moved and second, discussion.
Well, and if we may, Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, I would have concern if we was going to see an impact on one person, but it doesn't. There will not be one individual who's retired that is going to be impacted from that. It just moves that fully funded back. So. Okay.
If I remember from the original.
No, it's probably about a decade.
Is it that far?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was sooner. Pardon the director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Before it gets fully funded. 4 years. So
It's only
Tom said it's 4 years. I apologize.
So for 9 million, we've gained 4 years to 100% funded.
And the reason they wanted 100% funded is then they can start to take hold.
And quite frankly, the fund is not designed to give a COLA. Because the only way you would realistically give a COLA is if we increase the contributions.
And Mr. Chairman, I'd also add, just in a conversation I had with the association representing firefighters, I asked them, where this come from, because they had been part of that conversation last year. This was not something that they brought forward.
Okay. I mean, it's if you got $9 extra million, then it's just the best place to use for it. And that's just a personal thing. So there's a motion on the motion. All those in favor
On
of
the amendment.
The amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. That motion passes as amended. Any other amendments? Any other amendments? Roll call
Question?
as amended.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stitt.
Aye.
Representative Walter, Representative Swanitzer,
No.
Chairman Nicholas.
Right? So on the, I think 88 and 16, I think we're gonna wait because we want to do a little more homework on this on the referrals. How about 196? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, committee.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, I bring 196 on referral. The appropriation is for $203,000 in section 2. This is for 2 positions. Right now, we only have
Your
one.
mic on?
Yes, sir.
Get it a little closer. I can't hear you.
Yes. I recommend in the appropriation, I recommend do pass on 196 appropriation. We only have one person right now in the Homeland Security Agency to monitor and do everything related to the area of detection and we do not have the capability statewide at the county level and so forth and in the department to detect and report the businesses that would be in this category. And the amendment, there is a standing committee amendment. This is new statute in chapter 13 of Title 19. And what it is related to the Homeland Security Office establishing a reporting system for detecting and reporting threats to our critical infrastructure. On the second page of the bill, there are 16 infrastructure sectors listed. Our most important, well, that's a relative term. We have a significant amount of interest in energy, in the energy sector. And one of the 2 analysts that is proposed to be stood up in this bill is going to be dedicated to the energy sector. The other one is going to help the existing 3, well, we will have 3 on the team then, but they'll be looking at the whole state and the whole area related to threats to our critical infrastructure. There is a need for additional $5,000 for administrative support, which I will bring up later if the committee wishes to consider. But basically, that's the bill. We have no way to detect right now this important area of potential threats to the state of Wyoming. There is some federal assistance. There is a representative from the federal Homeland Security that's helping our local Homeland Security. But if you look at recent events in the states like North Carolina and Washington, where critical infrastructure has been damaged, I think it's very important that we get out ahead of this and establish a reporting system. I would just say in a summary way that the standing committee amendment is friendly. It in no way precludes us standing this important reporting system up. And with that, I'd ask for favorable consideration, Mr. Chairman. Are any questions? The draft bill itself comes from last year. Our Critical Infrastructure Security Act was updated. And part of that act asks that the federal level reach out to the states and find out what's going on in the area of protecting our critical infrastructure. And so that's the basis. As I said, visiting with the director and the executive staff, it was determined that we don't have this capability. I think it's important that we stand up at a reporting structure. Thank you.
So are there any outstanding federal funds to match any type of these activities? Come on up and give us a.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Committee. Lynn Budd, Director of the Office of Homeland Security for the state. Currently, the funding that we utilize for the Homeland Security mission is the Homeland Security grant. We have to pass through 80% of that to the local level. So the state is only able to utilize 20% of that grant. That includes grants to other other state agencies such as the Highway Patrol and things. Historically, when it first started, we would receive between 17 and $18 million in that grant. We currently receive about 4. And we fund 2 positions in our office with that grant right now. And there is a limitation as a percentage of how much we can utilize for staffing. So we are maximized on that right now.
So have you reviewed this bill?
Yes, I have, sir.
And does it, question is, does it make sense? Do you, something you think that should happen? Is it critical? Just tell us your position.
Sure, sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think it's critical. I think it's a start. I think there's a lot of work to be done in this area, both at the state and national level, being able to identify investments in our critical infrastructure by foreign countries. We know that that's a threat to our state, and there is a lot of foreign investment in our critical infrastructure in the state right now. So it's something that we do not have anything in place at the state level to identify those purchases at all. And you know, what you do with that is a whole other question, but being able to identify and get the information like from purchases at the local level, say from the county clerks, things like that. I think it's, we do have the See Something, Say Something program already established, which is supposed to look at different activities that would threaten our critical infrastructure, such as people surveilling activities, security, things like that. If we work to do additional messaging in that system to gather additional comments and information from the local level, and then look at how can we do that better at the state level. There will have to be some analysis of that information we receive. So there's no way my one position that covers 16 sectors of critical infrastructure right now, as well as cybersecurity, would be able to handle that analysis. I also believe that the energy sector is an extremely important sector and requires or should have some additional focus on it due to the importance in our state and the prevalence of the energy production.
And so if I look at the appropriation of 203,000, is that for 12 months or 15 months? Do you know?
12 months, sir.
What's the effective date on this?
I believe it's July 1. Mhm.
And so that means you're paying these individuals roughly $70,000 to $74,000 a year. Is that sufficient to get someone of this caliber to do what they're particularly doing?
Well, I would love to have it be a higher level. I think that it is going to be tough to find someone with this particular talent at this point in time, but it's certainly a start.
Mr. Chairman.
Director Bud. But the way I understand this, the way I read it, is it expands more than just looking at ownership of critical infrastructure by entities that we may be concerned with, foreign entities we may be concerned with. This all goes back, also goes back to the original intent of critical infrastructure, which we have a large geographic area that encompasses an enormous amount of what is designated as critical infrastructure. And so when, in addition to identifying some of these other people, it's also receiving and processing any reporting, any type of communication from within the state on potential risks or concerns on these critical infrastructures. Have I got that right?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, yes, you are correct. There certainly is a need for additional staff time for analysis of information that we receive regarding threats to our state.
Mr. Chairman.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman, so Director Bud, so if we authorize these positions and you hire these people, when they come to work each day, what are they going to be doing? Are they going to be sitting, waiting for a phone call for someone to report a threat? I mean, I just imagine them being quite bored actually for most of the time. And and so that's my first question. The second question is on the real estate and real property purchases. How do you see that playing out? Because to me, it seems that it could be really difficult to know who the beneficial owner of real estate actually is if the owner doesn't want you to know who they are?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, I believe you hit the nail on the head. It's going to be difficult. And what those people will be doing is actually evaluating all of the information that we receive. Also, we get a lot of information that is law enforcement sensitive, classified, other things, as well as open source information from the federal level, from our DHS partners and our CISA partners. CISA is a division of DHS, which is the Critical Infrastructure and Security Agency, I think. Anyway, they work with critical infrastructure, both on the cybersecurity side as well as the physical security side. So we have great partnerships. We have those folks that are actually stationed in our state and dedicated to our state. There is so much information that you could have 5 people looking at it. There are many states that have 5, 6 people doing critical infrastructure because you have the 16 different sectors. Also, most of the critical infrastructure is owned by private entities. So it takes time to build those partnerships and look at how do we develop that partnership so there's a trust there for reporting and for especially within the cybersecurity area because they have to feel comfortable in reporting and helping us to understand the threat without feeling like they're going to be looked upon as making a mistake. So cybersecurity is a particularly difficult area, and these positions also would be looking at that type of threat as well. So I have no doubt that they will be busy.
There's already federal folks in Wyoming that already do this, right? Or something similar.
Mr. Chairman, they have very specific tasks for themselves, and they are partners for us. And I would not say that they're looking at the national and international picture and helping to inform us. That happens through the Fusion Center process where all of the state, federal, local partners get together to share information.
Director Budd, it seems to me that historically, most of the concerns we have not been foreign, but have been domestic terror threats from whatever special interest groups do not like a particular critical infrastructure that may try to impede operation or construction or whatever. And when is that, again, just refreshing my memory that assessment's accurate?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, you are correct. That is where the threat seems to be evolving to, is more of the local folks, if you will, more of our homegrown violent extremists, as well as individuals that maybe have a problem with a particular company. A lot of those folks, though, not a lot, some of those folks are also motivated through other countries encouraging them to attack critical infrastructure. So there's kind of a mix there. So the ability to look at threats at the state and national level, but also the international level with those partnerships with our federal partners is critical to take all those little pieces and put them together to make a picture.
How does the salary that you have for these positions conform to your current staffing position? And so is this more of a mid-level or an entry-level position?
Mr. Chairman, no, it would be on the probably more of the mid-level, mid to upper level. This is a 10 is where we put it in at. Our current critical infrastructure position, I would like to move to a 10. It's currently a 9. There are our section chiefs are 11s. And that's the highest level in our agency right now, except for the executive staff.
So my question is, I'm sorry, is it seems to me, because this will biannualize, this will turn into $500,000 in our regular budget. There's something that makes sense to me, perhaps that we hire one, see what they do, see how efficient, what their job tasks are, evaluate what their work is. And then you can come back to us a year or 2 years from now and say, this is what this person does. It's really successful. We need another person to actually do this and stand up the rest of this, kind of, instead of jumping off the cliff all at once. I mean, to me, that makes a little bit more sense because you're going to be training 2 brand new people right out of the gate. But Tell me what your thoughts are.
Mr. Chairman, I understand your conservative approach there and I appreciate it. However, the only thing I would say is that we have been in need of an energy position for a long time, for several years and haven't pushed that forward just due to budget constraints and budget cuts and other things. I think if adding, so there's a definite need there for that position right now. I know that position can be kept busy. There will be no question about that. If you add this additional tasking, if you will, with the trying to gather additional information, trying to identify, where does this company actually live? There's going to require some research going back that way, or what are the actual threats to the state? I would certainly support any position, sir, but I would say that 2 positions, I think we can certainly keep busy.
So just one more thought. So you said that originally the federal budget roughly 16 to 18 million biennium, and that has been cut down to what?
Excuse me, annual, sir. Yeah. That was the Homeland Security grant that we received in the 2005, 2006 timeframe. And over the years, the Congress has reduced the funding for that specific grant. And so being 92% federally funded, that makes us quite vulnerable to Congress as to their whim as to what they want to fund. In the past, probably 10 years, we have not seen the grant go over. It's an annual grant that lasts for 3 to 4 years. And it go over, not over $5 million and mostly under $5 million.
And so it's the old adage, start with a lot of money. and
Yep.
the state's gotta take it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Representative Stitt, very nice.
Mr. Chairman, so Director Bud, as drafted, it looks like that the persons would be tasked with having a system for reporting suspicious activity from designated countries or companies or designated companies or persons. So this goes back to Representative Larson's question. What if you have an association of domestic valve turners who are a serious threat to energy infrastructure? Would they be invisible if we keep this language as it is in the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, that is something that we look at right now. And we work with the Fusion Center to look at individuals. I would not say that, you all are the experts on the law. And if you feel like that it needs to be included in here to make sure that we get the whole breadth of everything, I think that would certainly be appropriate.
Other
Does-
questions? We need public comment. Further public comment. Come on up.
Chairman Nicholas, I'm Sarah Dorenzo. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Economic Development Association. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today in favor of this important bill. WEDA represents over 200 economic developers, communities, and entities throughout Wyoming that work to foster economic growth and viability in the state. Protecting Wyoming from ill-intentioned countries and companies is a top priority. A mechanism such as this that protects Wyoming and allows for positive economic growth is vital today. This bill is not about specific threats. Rather, it's about being able to investigate who wants to do business in Wyoming. This act will serve as a tool for economic developers and organizations to conduct due diligence when evaluating companies. In addition to traditional tools that economic developers already use, such as economic impact analysis, financial review, background checks, and visits to local companies, this act will provide a means to ensure future employers in Wyoming are who they say they are and are not a threat to our state's and national well-being. We have foreign investments being made that may offer a position to bring threats, especially near substations that feed data centers, federal labs that serve the state, federal government, and military installations. This is a resource that we can offer communities to have the ability to call and ask quietly about company prospects to an agency that has the resources and means to investigate. WEDA supports the addition of these Homeland Security positions and the appropriation as they are truly necessary to adequately carry out the crucial duties of this bill. All right, thank you to Representative Henderson for bringing this, and WEDA asks for your support. I'll take any questions.
So Mr. Chairman, so let's imagine that you've got a Turkish company or a company from India that wants to expand its trona mine operations in Sweetwater County. Then do they kind of land on this list and they get like separately investigated? Is that what happens here?
Representative or Chairman, Representative. I don't know how exactly it would work as it plays out, but I imagine if an economic developer wanted or felt the need to investigate, they would put in a request, but it's not mandated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you aware that in any other state where they have these type of employees that they've identified a threat, have they actually been able to remove that company or person out? And what's the mechanism that you would use in the state of Wyoming to remove a threat?
Chairman, Representative, I don't have the information to answer that question, but I can look into it.
Chairman?
Go ahead. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tried to answer a piece of the good representative's question. It's a good question. The basis of this bill was borrowed from the state of Texas. North Dakota's had a similar bill in place. There are a number of other states that have the bill in place. In their bill, they have designated specific countries as threat countries. I chose not to do that, as I said earlier, as a result of conversations with key decision makers, Homeland Security and executive staff and some others, some business leaders. The mechanism would be a legal mechanism, and it would have to be litigated through that process, I believe, because of all the intricacies involved associated with businesses. Our primary threat, and I think that's the reason that I consider fundamentally the Standing Committee amendment friendly, is we added or companies. And my good colleague and friend to the right of me here made a very good point about the foreign ownership of one of our key industries in mining in the western part of the state. And so that's one of the reasons that I did not specify certain countries. I think we have a ways to go. We don't have a system set up yet to detect and report. And I think this is just a fundamental first step. There's a lot to learn. We're going to learn a lot, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Any other public comment?
Thank you.
Any other public comment on the bill? You're not really public.
I'm not sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was running up a little late. Erica Legursky, Senior Policy Advisor for Governor Gordon. Just wanted to be here to answer any questions. We have worked with Representative Henderson and also Director Budd on this bill. We don't have any issues with that. We did talk about those positions a couple of different times in a couple of different ways to ask for those positions. So when that came up across, we did think that we would put those in there. So we have talked to the governor about this and the need for that energy, particularly the energy position. And so just wanted to be here for any questions and let you know that we have no issues with the bill.
Questions for Eric? Any questions? Thank you. All right. Any other public comment? On the re-referral. Close public comment. We have a motion on the bill. Representative Henderson is a motion to do pass, I presume. Second. Seconded by Representative Walters. Any amendments?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I may make a motion for, at least for discussion per second, is the point that you brought up, sir, on the number of positions, but more importantly, the amount, the appropriation. One of the things that we don't know, but we've estimated is the administrative support amount. We've identified about $5,000 initially and $3,000 per year as a starting point on administrative support, to get this go on. So on page 6, section 2, line 20, would move to increase 203,000 to 208,000.
For a second. Moving second. Further discussion. So the problem, I think, there is that we don't know that that's what the money would be used for.
Yes, sir.
Theoretically, it could be used for salaries as well.
I'm open to a better way to word it, Mr. Chairman.
So that for that particular process, it may be better to bring a floor amendment to the bill.
Agree.
Add another,
So I withdraw my motion, sir.
I would think. Like, we can't really add that language in, on a rereferral.
Thank you.
I'd like to leave. We can subtract. And we could reduce the number of positions and leave the appropriation language so they properly fund the position. But are there any amendments? Go ahead, Representative Larson.
So as the bill is drafted right now, it doesn't require that the funds go to full-time. It just authorizes 2 full-time positions, but doesn't require that funding to go for 2 full-time positions. Am I reading that accurate?
Says shall not be expended for any other purpose.
Oh, does it?
Page 7, lines 3 and 4.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, any other amendments? Sensing your need to vote. All
Rep-
those in favor,
Roll call.
roll call.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson.
Aye.
Representative Sherwood. Representative Stith.
Aye.
Representative Walters. Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. That was painful. I did it. Okay, any other re-referrals? I think we'll hold off on the other 2. So now let's move to the bills. What do we have on the bill stack? My question is, are we gonna modify some of the language in the resolution? I don't. Yeah, I don't. And I didn't get to work on this one. I think we're gonna hold off on House Joint Resolution 6 and 7, because in our last meeting, we discussed these. We talked about amending them to make it more consistent with the recommendations of the Treasurer's Office and their investment portfolio folks. And Matt, you might want to remind us what exactly you wanted to do after we recess to make, so we can get those crafted. Because we kind of lose track of it.
We have a Medicaid resolution 12.
Okay, let's go to House Joint Resolution 12. And we do have a director here. And this is the Medicaid federal medical assistance percentage increase. I recognize this. So come on up, if you would, please. Okay. Stephanie, why don't you just tell us what this bill does and what the impacts are?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Stefan Johansson with the Department of Health. This bill or joint resolution is pretty simple. Authorizes or asks the congressional delegation to do some work to increase Wyoming's what we call FMAP, or Federal Medical Assistance Percentage, what we typically refer to as our Medicaid match from the feds. Without the adjustments that have been in place for the past couple of years due to the public health emergency, Wyoming for a good amount of time has been at the floor of the federal match percentage, which is 50-50. There are other states that are certainly higher than us in our region. And that's because it's based on a statutory formula in the Social Security Act that essentially looks at per capita income on a 3-year rolling basis. And as you all are aware, we do have an outlier county that really does impact Wyoming's calculation when it comes to its Medicaid match. So this bill would ask the congressional delegation to work with Congress to make changes to how FMAP is calculated. It has some suggestions in here to look at a median per capita income as opposed to average, as well as looking at potential population or rural health carve-outs. The way I read it, Mr. Chairman, as it's been drafted, is essentially to maybe establish a new floor for peculiar or specific states like Wyoming that are very large geographically, very small in population, and face some unique challenges when it comes to the cost of healthcare, mostly problems of scale because of our geography and small population. So again, this has been an issue that I know has frustrated this committee over the years, especially when we're funding certain things or even making cuts to certain things. That Wyoming, like our neighbor to the south and like some other higher income states, is at the floor of that federal match rate. So this bill wouldn't, at any sort of effective date, result in any action for the Medicaid program or Wyoming Department of Health. It would essentially continue the conversation since it is a congressionally controlled statutory formula for the federal match. Mr. Chairman, I might not have described that in the way it was intended by the drafters, but that's my reading of the bill and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman. So Director Johansson, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Johansson, I think this is not the first time you've penned out such a resolution. In the past, we've sent them to CMS, we've sent them to God, and we've sent them to every place else. But I think the importance of this resolution is this is our delegation. This is our representation in Wyoming. And as they go forth and try and do their work, it's important for them to be able to show to their colleagues that this is something that's important to from their respective legislative body, which this does. And the second thing I think it does, Mr. Chairman, is it sends a message to our congressional delegation. Listen, you guys are back doing all of this stuff, but we're trying to navigate for the best interests of our citizens this Medicaid challenge, and we need help here, and this is important. So be focusing more effort on trying to get this resolved. Is that kind of the message that we're trying to, that's what I think we're trying to convey. Do you think we've done that accurately?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I think so. And I will mention our delegation, I think are aware of this issue. We have Department of Health has a standing meeting with them on a regular basis with their staffers to talk about various issues related to health, healthcare, public health, Medicaid. But I think you're right. That summarizes what I read to be the intent of this bill, is to look at options to address the unique challenges of Wyoming. I would mention again on the fiscal side, there's kind of a dynamic here because anytime you look at changing calculations like federal match, allocations that are set, disproportionate share hospital payments is another big one on the Medicaid side. You're going to have winners and losers depending on what model Congress would look at. So I think that's would take a significant amount of conversation at the federal level, but I think the intent is certainly clear here that Wyoming's unique structure, population, financing, and income calculations do present challenges on the financial side for the state to fund our safety net programs in a way that even some of our neighboring states don't have as much of a challenge with.
So, Stephen, to me, it's I think we can frame it a little bit more simply, and that is that our cost of healthcare in Wyoming is higher than anyone's around us by far. Our cost of insurance for anyone around us is higher than anybody else's. And yet we do not have the population base and enough people contributing to our tax structure that we can compete with to take care and provide the healthcare services that every other state with larger populations can provide. So that is a lose-lose situation for us, particularly being the lowest populated state in the United States. So, but if we could just take probably 300 to 400 individuals who are multi-billionaires in one part of the state and take them out of the equation, then we'd be at 55%, just like that. And so that's how much impact just those individuals who happen to claim Wyoming as a residence with their 7 other homes because of our tax structure impacts our ability to fund healthcare and fund those senior care folks that are only covered by Medicare and Medicaid. And so frankly, we're at a huge disadvantage. So talk about a little bit what the economic impact is by going up to, if we go up to the next lower level than all the states around us.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, well said, better than I could have said it. In terms of what the impact would be, obviously can't give you hard numbers because it would change year to year if the calculation would change. But we actually did some analysis because as this committee might be aware, there's currently an incentive for states to expand Medicaid under the ACA that would result in a temporary 5% match increase to the traditional Medicaid program. We did that analysis and on a gross level, it would come out to about $54 million of general fund offsets or savings with a 5% match increase. So
54 a year by
Mr. Chairman, that's 54 million biennial. So we're, again, it really, I don't want to get too far into the weeds because we have a lot of different combined match rates and things like that with technology, et cetera. So we're speaking in rough numbers, but you know, every percentage increase in FMAP, the way that I think about it is at least $10 million of funding. So it's large numbers. And if the you know, the income calculations that you're referring to with one particular area of the state, if those were hypothetically exempted, then you're right. I think at a baseline, we'd be looking at a 5% federal match increase. But again, it's would really be dependent on what would result from this action at the congressional level. I'm not sure that, you know, a county exemption or carve out would be the result, but to your point, I think there's options here of looking at different types of
I mean,
median versus.
what we're asking really is, it's probably a rule revision so that you can go in and consider age population, you can consider, you know, the diversity of the state, you could, the frontier state, basically. You can consider the fact of our average cost of health and the amount of healthcare that's available. Also, we've got a growing aging population, and talk a little bit about the pressures now that we have on those senior nursing home care facilities and their abilities to survive in the current economic situation that we have.
Mr. Chairman, as is kind of summarized in the bill, Wyoming is one of the most rapidly aging states. Our population demographics, you've heard us talking about for a number of years that we are aging very, very rapidly. Compared to other states, we're probably in the top 5. Over the years, we've been the fastest aging state, changes year to year. That's important for the Department of Health and for Medicaid because Medicaid in Wyoming is one of the, if not the largest payers for long-term care services. To your question about nursing home or nursing facilities, about 65 to 70% of all nursing home bed days in Wyoming are funded by Wyoming Medicaid. So it's
I'm sorry, percentage of what?
About 65 to 70% of all nursing facility bed days are reimbursed by Wyoming Medicaid. So we are a very large payer of long-term care services. The reason that demographic that I mentioned of our aging population is so important is because more and more people over the years to come will be in some way financed by Medicaid for their long-term care services, whether that's in a nursing home or in home and community-based services or the general state plan. So it's very significant.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
on a similar note, Director Johansson, if you know, how many dollars is the state spending per year on nursing home beds, the state's share of it right now, and is that expected to grow?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stith, take that in reverse order. Yes, it's expected to grow. I might have to follow up on the exact dollar amount. I believe. Let me follow up with you, Representative Stith. It's state share would probably be around 50 million. Is what the chicken scratch on the paper says right now. But let me follow up on that and get you an exact number.
Representative Larson.
Director, since you've been with the Department of Health, are you aware of any action taken by our congressional delegation to make a change?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, by action, if you mean something that was considered legislatively in Congress, no, I'm not aware of that. But I will mention, again, this is not foreign to the delegation staffers that I have worked with for a number of years in terms of looking at how federal law or federal rule or policy could benefit Wyoming, specifically Wyoming Medicaid. A lot of the, as I mentioned, what we call disproportionate share hospital, things related to federal match. If if you recall, some of the federal legislation that was being contemplated with replacing the Affordable Care Act, there were House and Senate measures. We worked pretty closely on making sure that with the delegation that Wyoming would benefit. But in terms of congressional action specifically on the match rate, I'm not aware of anything. And again, I think that speaks to be quite blunt, members of the committee, when you have states that are at upwards of 70, 75, even close to 80% match, there's going to be other congressional delegations that are saying, don't you dare change that, because that's a significant part of their Medicaid finance.
And follow up, Mr. Chairman. And so Director, just, and I think that's part of the message we're trying to send. We get that the climate's steep, but at least try and climb. And, you know, we may not get to the top, but we just.
Well, honestly, it's hard to imagine that we, with the idea that our surrounding states, Idaho, Montana, South Dakota, North Dakota, Nebraska, Utah, all are in a higher ranking than we are and get more benefits than we do. We're just going, they don't have struggles that we do. Economic struggles.
Well, and I think, Mr. Chairman, and Director Johansson can tell me, so there's a fixed pot of money for Medicaid in the FMAP. And so if we increase our amount, somebody else is going to have to decrease their amount. So when you look at New York, Texas, California, probably the big three that, you know, maybe they can afford it, but it may very well be our neighboring states and say, whoa, you know, we fix you guys, it's going to drop us down a little, and we don't like that. So I think that is the challenge that our congressional delegation has, but let's try.
And Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, I would agree. I would just say that, again, one thing that the bill suggests in terms of the method could be something that minimizes the losers on that winners and losers type calculation, which is if there were somewhat of a new floor established for, as I mentioned, states that maybe there's a rural carve out or some sort of unique population carve out, then essentially what the loser on the financial side would be the federal government, but it could potentially come without the expense to other states' match rates.
Exactly. Okay, any other public comment? Any other public comment? Close public comment. We have a motion on the bill.
Move the resolution.
Moved by Representative Larson, second by Representative Sherwood. Any discussion? Dave?
Mr. Chairman, are you taking amendments?
Sure.
Okay, so early in my career as a legislator, there is an amendment coming. But I think I realize the ineffectiveness of joint resolutions. But I also believe there's a mechanism somewhere buried back in our records. So my motion would be that we send this with return receipt requested. And I don't know what the exact language is on that, but otherwise, sometimes they just kind of get filed away in a person's filing cabinet, was my understanding. So.
Well, there's only 3 persons that it goes to. So, but I like the idea. Okay, well, I'm never a fan of joint resolutions, but I think it's important enough that our elected officials have an understanding that this is an important subject to the state of Wyoming. So they just kind of move it up on their priority list. I mean, that's really what this is intended to do.
And
I've had this conversation with a couple of our members, and I feel like, you know, it's a little bit like talking to the wall. So.
Yeah, and Mr. Chairman, I totally agree with you. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to put an exclamation mark.
Yeah.
So that if it doesn't get a second, it's not a problem.
Maybe a friendly amendment to that, Mr. Chairman. Maybe we request the Secretary of State to deliver it in person.
Okay, but do you have an amendment? It's just a conceptual amendment, or do you want?
I do not have the actual amendment, but I could probably dig it out and bring it to the floor.
Any other discussion? Okay, roll call.
Representative Henderson. Representative Larson. Representative Sherwood. Representative Stith.
Aye.
Representative Walters. Representative Swanitzer.
Aye.
Chairman Nicholas.
Aye. Okay, let's see when she rises. Lloyd, be ready, because I'm gonna ask you to present my bill. If you don't mind.
I would be thrilled. I was so hoping you would ask me.
Okay, anything else that we're gonna do today? Well, in the next 30 minutes.
Everybody ready? Everybody ready for this afternoon?